Thank
I
God. RSA, anime, these videos are the bomb. But like, it works.
Okay.
In my bag.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah.
James.
I didn't get to all the groups, but I heard some really interesting discussions about this chaos order situation. Anybody have an insight that was particularly interesting you'd like to share with the group?
Well, we realized a lot of our chaos experiences had to do with the arts, and then when I was trying to think of some experiences that were very, very orderly for me, I found that I don't know if a lot of people went through this, but I went through the IB program, and Jill went through the AP. And it's we were saying how they're kind of disguised as chaotic and more creative and stuff like that. But in my school, you had to take classes within categories, but they only offered one class in each category, so everyone ended up taking the exact same classes, doing the exact same projects, so I guess, and before you enroll in it, you're oh, I have so many options, I can explore music and stuff, but yeah, there's just so many requirements and subcategories that made it unenjoyable, I guess.
Okay, so they were pushing toward too much order.
Yeah, yeah.
It's similar to scheduling. They're
Yeah.
you have so many things that you could choose from, and then
but you, have
register, and there's some changing times, and you have requirements for sophomore portfolio. Each classes are limited.
You should take this.
18 credits, so you don't really have that much choice.
So there's the illusion of some chaos, but there's less than you think there is.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's reminded me of a video that I saw a year or two ago. That was on ABC Nightline. It's a clip on YouTube, but it was from ABC Nightline. Interviewing this mom who is unschooling her children, and I hadn't heard of this until I saw this video. And basically, she declared letting your kids do whatever they want, whenever they want, as the education approach that she's choosing for her kids. So they literally just stay home all day and go to bed when they want, get up when they want, eat when they want, do whatever they want all day. So they're literally not being schooled. But she somehow declared it as an education preference. So it's really interesting.
Going way to the other end of the extreme.
Yeah.
It's sort of like Summerhill to the extreme. I want to tie this in with motivation as well. The being at the point where complexity emerges, where chaos and order are balanced, as I mentioned before, has a motivational component. When you are up there, when your mind is complex or working in complex ways, you tend to be highly motivated. And there is research on motivation that's kind of counterintuitive. There's a motivational model that I'll show you that you'll probably resonate with when you think about your passion for your specialization. But let's have a look at this thing first. This is Daniel Pink, who's providing a synthesis of the research on motivation.
Our motivations are unbelievably interesting. I find I've been working on this for a few years, and I just find the topic still so amazingly engaging and interesting. So I want to tell you about that. The science is really surprising. The science is a little bit freaky. Okay, we are not as endlessly manipulable and as predictable as you would think. There's a whole set of unbelievably interesting studies. I want to give you two that call into question this idea that if you reward something, you get more of the behavior you want. If you punish something, you get less of it. So let's go from London to the mean streets of Cambridge, Massachusetts, the northeastern part of the United States. And let's talk about a study done at MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Here's what they did. They took a whole group of students and they gave them a set of challenges. Things like memorizing strings of digits, solving word puzzles, other kinds of spatial puzzles, even physical tasks like throwing a ball through a hoop. Okay, they gave them these challenges and they said to incentivize their performance, they gave them 3 levels of rewards. Okay? So if you did pretty well, you got a small monetary reward. If you did medium well, you got a medium monetary reward. And if you did really well, if you were one of the top performers, you got a large cash prize. Okay? We've seen this movie before. This is essentially a typical motivation scheme within organizations, right? We reward the very top performers, we ignore the low performers, and the other folks kind of in the middle. Okay, get a little bit. So what happens? They do the test, they have these incentives. Here's what they found out. One, as long as the task involved only mechanical skill, bonuses work as they would be expected. The higher the pay, the better the performance. Okay, that makes sense. But here's what happens. But once the task called for even rudimentary cognitive skill, a larger reward led to poorer performance. Now this is strange, right? A larger reward led to poorer performance? How can that possibly be? Now what's interesting about this is that these folks here who did this are all economists, two at MIT, one at the University of Chicago, one at Carnegie Mellon, okay? The top tier of the economics profession. And they're reaching this conclusion that seems contrary to what a lot of us learned in economics, which is that the higher the reward, the better the performance. And they're saying that once you get above rudimentary cognitive skill, it's the other way around. Which seems like this kind of, the idea that these rewards don't work that way seems vaguely left-wing and socialist, doesn't it? It's kind of this kind of weird socialist conspiracy. For those of you who have those conspiracy theories, I want to point out the notoriously left-wing socialist group that financed the research, the Federal Reserve Bank. So this is the mainstream of the mainstream coming to a conclusion that's quite surprising. It seems to defy the laws of behavioral physics. So this is strange. It's strange finding. So what do? They say, this is freaky. Let's go test it somewhere else. Maybe that $50 or $60 prize isn't sufficiently motivating for an MIT student, right? So let's go to a place where $50 is actually more significant relatively, right? So let's take the experiment. We're going to go to Madurai, India, rural India, where $50, $60, whatever the number was, is actually a significant sum of money. So they replicated the experiment in India roughly as follows. Small rewards, the equivalent of 2 weeks' salary. Small performance, low performance, 2 weeks' salary. Medium performance, about a month's salary. High performance, about 2 months' salary. Okay, so those are real good incentives. Okay, so you're going to get a different result here. Well, what happened though was that the people offered the medium reward did no better than the people offered the small reward. But this time around, the people offered the top reward. They did worst of all. Higher incentives led to worse performance. What's interesting about this is that it actually isn't all that anomalous. This has been replicated over and over and over again by psychologists, by some extent by sociologists, and by economists, over and over and over again. For simple, straightforward tasks, those kinds of incentives, if you do this, then you get that, they're great. For tasks that are algorithmic, set of rules where you have to just follow along and get a right answer, if-then rewards, carrots and sticks, outstanding. But when the task gets more complicated, when it requires some conceptual, creative thinking, those kinds of motivators demonstrably don't work. In fact, money is a motivator at work, but in a slightly strange way. If you don't pay people enough, they won't be motivated. What's curious about, there's another paradox here, which is that the best use of money as a motivator is to pay people enough to take the issue of money off the table. Pay people enough so that they're not thinking about money, they're thinking about the work. Now, once you do that, it turns out there are 3 factors that the science shows lead to better performance. Not to mention personal satisfaction. Autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Autonomy is our desire to be self-directed, to direct our own lives. Now, in many ways, traditional notions of management run afoul of that. Management is great if you want compliance, but if you want engagement, which is what we want in the workforce today as people are doing more complicated, sophisticated things, self-direction is better. Let me give you some examples of almost radical forms of self-direction in the workplace that lead to good results. Let's start with this company right here, Atlassian, an Australian company. It's a software company, and they do something really cool. Once a quarter, on a Thursday afternoon, they say to their developers, for the next 24 hours, you can work on anything you want. You can work on it the way you want. You can work on it with whomever you want. All we ask is that you show the results to the company at the end of those 24 hours in this fun kind of meeting, not a star chamber session, but this fun meeting with beer and cake and fun and other things like that. It turns out that that one day of pure, undiluted autonomy has led to a whole array of fixes for existing software, a whole array of ideas for new products that otherwise had never emerged. One day. Now, this is not an if-then incentive. This is not the sort of thing that I would have done 3 years ago before I knew this research. I would have said, you want people to be creative and innovative? Give them a freaking innovation bonus. If you do something cool, I'll give you $2,500. They're not doing this at all. They're essentially saying, you probably want to do something interesting. Let me just get out of your way. One day of autonomy produces things that have never emerged. Now let's talk about mastery. Mastery is our urge to get better at stuff. We like to get better at stuff. This is why people play musical instruments on the weekend. You have all these people who are acting in ways that seem irrational economically. They play musical instruments on weekends. Why? It's not going to get them a mate. It's not going to make them any money. Why are they doing it?
True.
Because you get better at it, and that's how it's fun. Go back in time a little bit. I imagine this if I went to my first economics professor, a woman named Mary Alice Schulman, and I went to her in 1983 and said, Professor Schulman, can I talk to you after class for a moment? Yeah. I got this inkling, I got this idea for a business model. I just want to run it past you. Here's how it would work. You get a bunch of people around the world who are doing highly skilled work, but they're willing to do it for free and volunteer their time, 20, sometimes 30 hours a week. Okay, she's looking at someone skeptically there. Oh, but I'm not done. And then what they create, they give it away rather than sell it. It's going to be huge. She truly would have thought I was insane. Right? It seemed to fly in the face of something you think. Well, what do you have? You have Linux powering 1 out of 4 corporate servers in Fortune 500 companies, Apache powering more than the majority of web servers, Wikipedia. What's going on? Why are people doing this? Why are these people, many of them are technically sophisticated, highly skilled people who have jobs, okay? They have jobs. They're working at jobs for pay, doing challenging, doing sophisticated technological work. And yet, during the limited discretionary time, they do equally, if not more, technically sophisticated work, not for their employer, but for someone else for free. That's a strange economic behavior. Economists who look into it, why are they doing this? It's overwhelmingly clear. Challenge and mastery, along with making a contribution. That's it. What you see more and more is a rise of what you might call purpose motive. Is that more and more organizations want to have some kind of transcendent purpose. Partly because it makes coming to work better, partly because that's the way to get better talent. And what we're seeing now is, in some ways, when the profit motive becomes unmoored from the purpose motive, bad things happen. Bad things ethically sometimes, but also bad things just like not good stuff, like crappy products, like lame services, like uninspiring places to work. That when the profit motive is paramount, or when it becomes completely unhitched from the purpose motive, it just, people don't do great things. More and more organizations are realizing this and sort of disturbing the categories between what's profit and what's purpose. And I think that actually heralds something interesting. And I think that the companies organizations that are flourishing, whether they're profit, for profit, or somewhere in between, are animated by this purpose model. Let me give you a couple of examples. Here's the founder of Skype. He says, our goal is to be disruptive, but in the cause of making the world a better place. Pretty good purpose. Here's Steve Jobs. I want to put a ding in the universe. All right? That's the kind of thing that might get you up in the morning and racing to go to work. So I think that that we are purpose maximizers, not only profit maximizers. I think the science shows that we care about mastery very, very deeply. And the science shows that we want to be self-directed. And I think that the big takeaway is that if we start treating people like people and not assuming that they're simply horses, slower, smaller, better smelling horses, if we get past this kind of ideology of carrots and sticks and look at the science, I think we can actually build organizations and work lives that make us better off, but I also think they have the promise to make our world just a little bit better.
So this connects back to the chaos order continuum. And it also connects with this. Have you read anything by Csikszentmihalyi?
Bless you.
Flow experience, yeah. I may have said this in a class before, but he's the guy he's a prominent creativity scholar. And he's the flow guy. And he's the one who's from the University of Chicago, and he used to tell his grad students that if they learned how to spell and pronounce his name, he would give them their doctorate without having to do any work.
How do you say it again?
I say it Csikszentmihalyi because that's the way I've heard it said.
Csikszentmihalyi.
Yeah.
There's like
I
4
know.
extra
Yeah.
letters in that.
Well, Croatian is pretty hard to master, but this is a model that shows the creativity connection with flow. So that if you look at the dimensions here, you've got skill on the bottom going that way. The further you go to the right, the more skill is required for the task. And challenge, or more skill you have rather, and the vertical dimension is the challenge of the task. So if you're down in the lower left-hand corner where the task doesn't require any challenge and doesn't require skill, and you have high skill, or you have low skill, you're going to be apathetic. But on the opposite side of it, in the upper right-hand corner, when you have a high level of skill, and the task is very challenging and complex, that's a sweet spot where the flow experience kind of kicks in. And is there anybody here who hasn't heard about flow experience? Okay, just a very quick synopsis of it. The flow experience was discovered by Csikszentmihalyi and a few others, and it's a state you get in when you do something that is creative and engaging. And a typical example of it is when you start doing some work and you kind of get locked into it and you're really intently focused. You have a sense of euphoria, a passion about what you're doing. Time goes faster and the external environment doesn't seem to intrude on your consciousness. Anybody want to tell us a story about how you've had the flow experience at one time or another?
Talk to Dr. Parente.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. Parente wrote his whole dissertation for his doctorate about flow. He's a piano teacher here.
Okay.
Book about it.
He's crazy about
He definitely
several
written
books.
more than one book.
Several
Mostly
books.
about practice techniques. So yeah, so when we practice or when we're in class piano, he likes to have us break down a task so that we're never challenging ourselves too much, and that gets rid of anxiety. And as we're like repeating, 4 seconds of music, which is his big thing. It should be 4 seconds of music, not anymore. Then we're like focusing on relaxing, and I've experienced flow. You know, let me tell you, it's real.
It's a real thing.
So, all of the education majors had this class last semester that was taught by Dr. Parente, and it was about Dalcroze rhythmics and flow, and about like internalizing music and rhythm and things like that. And Dr. Parente is a pianist, so it was a pretty interesting approach. But everyone kind of like jokes about flow at Westminster because of how much we talk about it.
Also
But
because
then,
he sounds like
but
a
then,
Muppet.
but then, no.
Does sound like a Muppet.
Listen though, this is so,
Some movies and stuff.
this is like true, I'm being real here. I like thought, I was like, this doesn't exist for me, like I didn't buy into it. But now I have Dr. Parente this semester for piano, and I was not clicking with piano, like it wasn't clicking for me. But in my first class with Dr. Parente in piano, my class went into flow as we were studying.
Testify, sister.
No, I'm serious.
No,
it was really cool.
No, I know. I'm saying
And
the same thing happened.
I've like my skill level has just increased so much, and like my confidence since I've learned about like how to practice and how to achieve this state where I'm not I don't have so much anxiety and my skill level is matched with challenge. That's what Parente always says, match the challenge with your skill. So like I didn't buy it, but then I actually took a class with him and it was amazing.
What you will notice if you continue in a profession or some kind of endeavor, like some kind of artistic endeavor, throughout the long term you'll get better at it, you'll become more skilled. The more skilled you become, the more you'll seek out challenges, the more challenges you overcome through that skill. They reinforce each other and you get better and you experience the flow more frequently. And the research on it, researchers who talk about it, say things like, those who experience it a few times try to figure out ways to make it happen more often. It's like a natural drug. So you're actually seeking this drug-like experience by trying to set up conditions that will make it happen. Because you can't control it. You can make it more likely to emerge. But you can't say, okay, today I'm going to have a flow experience. When, stop me if I've told you this before. Here's one of my flow experiences. When I was in my doctoral program, I was writing my dissertation, and that's a huge project. I came home one Friday and said, okay, I'm going to sit down and work on this chapter for an hour or two. And I really got into it. Something was really clicking with it. So I was intently focused, and it was just like in a cartoon. The sun went down, sun came up, sun went down, sun came up again. I stayed there with just a few little breaks, no sleep, from Friday afternoon to Sunday morning.
What? Wow.
Why that?
You were just.
Well,
Because it was due on Monday.
No, you're on to me. It was actually, it wasn't extrinsic motivation that was happening, and it actually did happen that way.
That's crazy.
Now, I probably shouldn't have done that.
Really? You think he died after and now he's teaching the class, Sam?
I was pretty sleepy after, let's put it that way. I could have died afterwards because that Sunday I almost walked in front of a bus because I was kind of sleepy after the.
Well,
There would have been a
Was
different.
the doctor.
So now when you're talking.
Yeah, this guy's all drugged up. But
There's
we
an
can't find
alternate
it.
universe where these classes go to.
If you talk to athletes that are at a very high level, they have what's called being in the zone, and that's an analogous experience. Like if you are a baseball player and you're in Yankee Stadium at the facing a pitcher who's throwing a 95-mile-an-hour fastball, and you're not in the zone, you'll see the pitcher wind up, and you'll hear this swish, and you'll hear the smack of the catcher's mitt, and you'll take a futile swing. But if you are in the zone, those who get into the zone, and athletes frequently do this because they're highly skilled, they'll say, when I'm like that, the ball slows down and gets bigger, and I can hit it, because they're intently focused on it. So there's something real going on here.
Yeah, like my tennis coach used to tell us that we weren't allowed to say the word think. You're not allowed to think in tennis, you just have to do. And the only way you can do that is if you're actually experiencing flow.
True.
So.
So I just brought this motivation stuff and the flow experience into it because it connects with the chaos order continuum. You can't have the flow experience, you can't be motivated highly if you are in excessive order or excessive chaos. The only place you'll find that is when you've blended chaos and order together sufficiently to find that zone in the middle where you can reach highly complex levels of thought and behavior. Okay, let's switch to something else.
Alrighty, we're going to switch to Pygmalion. And so the first thing I'm going to do is assign each of you one of the discussion questions. So,
What? No, he said we could look at it.
It's similar.
Yeah, the ending was
Yes.
different.
Where were they
So he was
discussing?
like,
The ending, I felt like the ending was really unexpected. What?
That was not-
Yeah.
that was not-
How they kind of.
Okay, so
They kind of was like.
I've composed 16 discussion questions for Pygmalion. There are 15 of us here, so I will take the final one. So basically you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. I'm going to give you 5 minutes to discuss them. Now it turns out the person who has question 10 and the person who has question 14, those are related questions. So whoever you are, you might want to work together. I'm going to put the timer up, and what we'll do is give you 5 minutes to figure out a response to the question. And then we might get some of the responses and then maybe take our break and then get the rest of them, okay? So you got 5 minutes to come up with a response to that question. Let me go get the online timer.
Where are these questions?
They're in the module for this week. Start. Okay, so so there are the questions. If you can read them up there, if not, if you can't read them from there, I've got hard copy of them here. So, does somebody want a hard copy of the question to see what you, see the question? Hard copy. Hard copy. Anybody else need a hard copy of the questions?
The way, first of all, the way, yeah, in my family, because now they don't. Oh, yeah, not specifically. Kind of like right. So it's just like yeah, but I mean, like for the entire story talks about her being and then she discovers her independence. I don't feel that she I feel like her, I mean, her leading first, like, obviously, in the story is strong, especially like her independence, but looking at the story as a whole, I don't like the way that she's portrayed as a woman, as a young woman, as a woman who, like, you know, like the way that, treats her, basically. But the way you're supposed to assume is that Higgins treats everyone like that, except her.
Yeah.
What's interesting when you bring it here, you can help me with mine, because mine was about it being a feminist play and a satire and such. I definitely feel the whole. I mean, I feel like just like if you look at it as just like the journey of this weird captive in this kind of apartment, like learning how to be a human to leaving his apartment and deciding he's going to be his own human and make it fun. That's somewhat empowering. I would not say that that's
Okay, about half your time is passed.
Define. That article. So you're just talking about what makes you a feminist.
Yeah.
And I heard something about shaving armpits.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're a feminist, you're not allowed to shave your
Yeah,
armpits.
exactly.
Yeah, like, no.
And if you're a feminist, you must believe that women should more feminist.
No.
Yeah.
Damn, that was harsh.
Which number?
Oh, I said am I right?
Not lost on myself. I'm not
Yeah,
Oh
I know.
my goodness.
so presumptuous.
Just scared.
It was the whole concept that we're female is super well, like,
I've known for a while.
to go back, but also
I've known for a while.
not wealthy enough to like marry up.
That's a-
Well, that's what I think is
Well, I
you
know.
need to find out.
We were above that up until now.
Show up with like woolly mammoth like.
Okay, you got 1 minute left.
I don't think it's setting her up to live a better life.
Yeah.
You know, she would rather provide anything.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely.
Then
I'm not, no. Well, that's.
what you're doing.
Shave
No,
that.
this is your question, you're like, yeah, you're right. The whole dichotomy I get. I hate that thing so much.
And I love saying, time is up, pens are down. All right, so, the name of the play alludes to a Greek myth. Comment upon the significance.
So the Greek myth goes that there's this guy, a sculptor named Pygmalion, and he creates this ivory statue of a woman, and he just does such a great job, and it's such a beautiful statue that he falls in love with it, like legit. So he goes to Aphrodite and is like, I really love this statue, can you please make it a real person so I can marry it? And so Aphrodite grants his wish, and he goes home and kisses the statue, and he's like, oh, you're a person, this is great. So they get married, and they have a daughter, but in some versions of the story they have a son. So this relates to the Pygmalion story that we read in the case that Higgins sort of reinvents Eliza in the sense that she's like this, flower girl, can't really talk correctly, and he like reinvents her and brings her to life into like society.
All right, and it turns out the whole Pygmalion story appears over and over again in different cultures, and when you think of Pinocchio, is this a variant on the same story, all right? The first scene depicts an interaction between upper and lower class English people. The upper class people have just been to the theater. Comment upon Shaw's choice to show this antithesis in the context of a high culture art event. So you got lower class and upper class, but they're not just happen to be somewhere. They've just come out of the theater.
I think in the beginning of the scene, it was to marginalize Eliza from the upper class and show like how distinct her patterns of speech were compared to them, and like how much lower she was. But once Higgins begins to pick out the nuances of the upper classes patterns of speech, it shows like she's not so much different than them and like she has just as much of a right to be in this setting as they do. So yeah, and I said that it kind of makes the upper class people look dumb and out of place towards the end of the scene.
Okay, that's an interesting take. Thank you. All right. Critics have described Pygmalion as a satire about both social class and as a feminist play. What do you think about those characterizations?
It kind of seems like there was a lot of pity, I think, and I don't think it was positive. I think it was negative. Like the more affluent should pity the poor, and they're too good for the poor. And when Eliza, before she lived with Higgins, the constable and the women that were on the street were like, oh, well, I just don't have change for you right now, but I would give you change, blah, blah, blah. And she just seems like this really small person, I think, Eliza, even though she's like loud and obnoxious with the way that she speaks, but her personality just seems like very small and very meek. And I don't know if I would qualify this as a feminist play, because yes, she does have this like, I'm gonna be independent, but she's running into the arms of a man, and she doesn't really know this guy. She just knows that he likes her, or he treats her differently than Higgins does, and she was taken in by Higgins, but Higgins also has Colonel Pickering, who is also a man, and it's these two men molding this woman, and Mrs. Pierce is the help, and it's like, is this really men and women on an equal plane, or is it women doing the housekeeping? And when Eliza's there, she's taught to get his slippers, tell Mrs. Pierce all these things that he wants her to do, and I don't know if it's really about empowering women to be equal with men, or if it's just like yeah, men are still superior to women.
Okay.
So
Interesting. And when you think about it, it's like, okay, maybe it might have passed for feminism in 1914,
Yeah.
which is a little different from 2016. Yeah, and so they would have been probably critics talking about it from the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, might have been saying there's a feminist thread to this. All right. Note the power dynamics between Freddie and the daughter and the mother. What's going on there?
Yeah, simply, mother and daughter just sort of like telling Freddie to go do this thing, and then he comes back and he's like, I can't do it, it's raining. And they're like, no, go do it. And then they leave him. I mean, the power dynamics, I guess that it's sort of, it's a contrast between the dynamics between Pickering, Higgins, and Eliza, and, you know, if you want to look at, like, gender roles, supposedly, right, you have, like, the really, like, the wealthy woman and her, you know, dressed up daughter, and they're all really doing well, and they have their son, who's sort of just, like, little, he just, like, becomes a little door guy, right?
Yeah.
Like a bellboy. He's like a bellboy. Which is like funny and sort of, it seemed a little out of place almost, considering the relationships between male and female characters throughout the rest of the show, actually. But other than that.
Okay, and one of the things, when I first read it, I didn't realize that Freddie is the brother to the daughter, Clara, and his mother.
Yeah.
I thought they were boyfriend and girlfriend. And so what I see is, there's a couple women telling, okay, you're the man, go out and get us a cab. And he can't get a cab because it's raining, so then they berate him for not being able to do what is a man's job. So it has a couple consequences, one of which is Freddie's just getting smaller and smaller. And the women, you know, they're getting kind of bigger because they get to boss this guy around for something that he can't do. Alrighty. Note how insulting Professor Higgins is towards Eliza. Comment upon the impact that behavior has upon your emotional response towards the characters of Eliza and Higgins. How did it make you feel?
Well, all his words calling her an animal and a baggage and wicked. I mean, clearly those show us that he doesn't. We don't have sympathy towards him. He is a bad character because he's so insulting. And I find it interesting that you brought up the woman having a power dynamic over Freddie, because as a teacher, Higgins he's pretty bad when at the end of Act 2 when he's telling her to say A, B, C instead of A, B, C, whatever it is. He yells at her and like roars. So that's a way of bringing her down, and all his insults do the same thing. And then in Act 5, when she's making her big speech before she exits, she's talking to Pickering, and she says the difference between a lady and a flower girl is not how she behaves, but how she's treated. Because she'll always be a flower girl to Higgins because he treats her like that. But she was able to successfully become a lady because of Pickering's teachings and because of how he treated her. So as a teacher, Pickering really won. I think that is important to the question.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. Thank you. Okay, note the concerns by the lower class characters about the possibility of police intervention. Comment upon the significance of this in light of the sociology of urban population. So the first thing, they're saying that Eliza took money from somebody, didn't give him a flower, and they're saying, and there's a copper over there watching us. So what's going on with the lower class people being concerned about the police presence?
So, I think it's interesting, first of all, that it's a problem because she's being watched. But I think it's also interesting that the lower class are the ones that help her out, whereas the upper class are kind of like, oh, don't worry about it, it's fine, like, it's just money. But, I found it in relation to, Charles Dickens, who had only died 43 years before the premiere of Pygmalion. And, I think of A Christmas Carol, where, you know, you see how the poor are literally being thrown in jail just for that, being poor, and how these people are being targeted by the police and always worried about the police because of the mere fact that they're poor.
Okay, and when you think of many police organizations maybe have the mottos protect and serve, and so they should be protecting all of us and serving all of us. But in many cases, they're protecting the rich people from the poor people. And so in that little bit there, Shaw seems to be aware of the fact that these poor people are thinking the cops are not their friends, and the rich people probably understand that the cops are their friends, who would then protect them from this unscrupulous flower girl who's just going to take your money and not give you any flowers. All right, what about Shaw's unconventional punctuation? Did you notice his unconventional punctuation?
Only in certain parts.
Okay.
And I felt that it was mostly when people are nervous or angry or
Okay.
upset. And I think it's just to kind of to simulate how people speak normally.
Okay.
That's, I don't know, that's just my guess.
Some things, he doesn't use apostrophes, so can't is C-A-N-T, don't is D-O-N-T. So many of the things, which are these marks that we now use in standard written English, he doesn't abide by them. And so, I won't be able to bring it up there, but think of the word G-H-O-T-I, right? How do you pronounce the word G-H-O-T-I?
Fish.
Fish, okay? G-H as in enough, O as in women, T-I as in anything, nation, whatever. Shaw wanted to,
I already knew it.
Shaw wanted to revise spelling because English spelling is very chaotic. And what happens is it disenfranchises the poor and the undereducated. Imagine, okay, here in an English-speaking country, we have these spelling bees. And in a spelling bee, someone who spells well keeps getting praise and reward for doing it, and someone who spells poorly, you sit down, right? Imagine a spelling bee in either Germany or Spain. It would go on forever because nobody would make any mistakes because their spelling is completely regular. English spelling is wildly irregular, and Shaw, as a political position, wanted to regularize English spelling because it's a tyrannical system that disenfranchises the poor and the undereducated. And so his use of idiosyncratic punctuation is part of that. So he says, let's make it spelled the way it sounds.
Yeah. I also thought it was funny at the beginning of the play. Before it started, he made a little note saying, like, by the way, if you see an upside down E, like that's the neutral vowel, and our stupid language doesn't have a letter for it.
Yeah.
And it's one of the most common sounds we have in the language.
We have a bunch of letters for it, they're just not the same.
Well, yeah. Okay, so
change.
Where is it? I want to find it because it was really fun.
It was right in the beginning. Yeah.
Oh yeah, in the dialogue, an E upside down indicates an indefinite vowel, sometimes called obscure or neutral, for which, though it is one of the commonest sounds in English speech, our wretched alphabet has no letters.
So Shaw had very strongly felt political positions about spelling, grammar, punctuation, education, etc. And one of the things he says is, I'm not going to use those stupid apostrophes because I'm just not going to use them. All right, Matt, your question is, what particular aspect of language Professor Higgins finds most fault with? Is that consistent with your notions of what constitutes proper language?
Was it grammar? Is that what?
That's what I said.
Okay.
Well, okay, one of the questions is, what is grammar? So, okay, is everybody here native speaker of English? English was their first language for all of us? How confident are you that you know English grammar? Let's see hints. Okay. All right. I would say all of you had near total control of English grammar by the age of 6. But what you have is you have tacit knowledge of grammar. So it turns out there's a rule for how you should stack the adjectives that come before a noun. Okay? And you probably don't know the rule. But you as native speakers would say 3 big old red houses. A non-native speaker might say 3 old red big houses. Okay? So it turns out there's a rule for the order of adjectives that you know, but you don't know that you know it.
What is it?
So one of the things, well, basically you're gonna go numerical first, and then you're gonna start to go to size, and then you're gonna go to color, and then you're gonna go to condition, etc.
There's also the grammatically correct sentence: the mouse, the cat, the dog chased 8 died.
Yeah.
That's so it's the mouse died, or it's so you have each of the individual nouns, and then it's arranged with the verbs afterwards, and it's because you can have 2 nouns and then place the verb afterwards. And so it's grammatically correct, but it makes absolutely no sense when spoken. And or like buffalo, 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 which is a full sentence. But like it's that those are just some of the examples I came up with. It's buffalo from buffalo, buffalo, other buffalo from buffalo, who buffalo, buffalo from buffalo.
I'm still not quite following. Carry on.
We can put these up on the screen later because we need to see them to help. So you say you think it focuses on grammar.
I say that I think it focuses on grammar because, and it's really interesting because it's on grammar and it's also on the content of what is said. So like that was another thing that he really emphasized with her, which is it's not necessarily like what you say, or it's not necessarily how you say it so much as what you say.
Okay.
But so I think it was his. I think grammar and content were his like main focuses, and they're not necessarily consistent with my personal notions of what constitutes proper language, because my personal notion of what constitutes proper language is any language that is used for communication and can correctly convey an idea. So if it's not necessarily grammatically correct, but the person that you're talking to knows what you're saying, then that's proper language.
Okay. Now, I'm going to disagree and say his primary focus wasn't grammar, it was pronunciation.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And now one of the things is, okay, who here thinks they have an accent?
We all have accents. They're just the same as each other.
Okay. I happened to grow up in a place that had an accent that I didn't get because my parents didn't have it. I grew up in northeastern Pennsylvania. And some of my friends said, I'm walking down the street, talking to my friend, bouncing a ball against the wall. And I say, I'm walking down the street, talking to a friend, bouncing a ball against the wall. And then one time I said to my wife something about my wallet. She says, you're what? My wallet? She says, no, it's a wallet. So it turns out I have a few of those northeastern Pennsylvania things. But by and large, we all have accents. And his focus is primarily on, she has this Cockney accent. Now, in a couple places, she uses the wrong form of a verb, etc., particularly in the end, and then she corrects herself on that. So it's really accent rather than grammar. And then the question is, how important is accent? If you're going to educate students, how important is it that you get them to have the proper accent?
I guess I interpreted the question as like what he found would be the hardest for, like, because there is, I think it's Act 2 where he says, I really like this interchange. She says, I got my feelings same as anyone else. And then Higgins says, you see the difficulty. Pickering says, what difficulty? And he says, to get her to talk grammar, the mere pronunciation is easy enough. So like I guess that's where I got that notion from.
Now, I don't think of you as having a Texas accent. And
it
turns out I have in my mind, there's probably multiple Texas accents.
Yes, there are.
And so I don't know how I would categorize your accent, but if somebody said, is he from Texas? I'd say no. So I don't know, how did that happen?
Well, honestly, I don't really know. My dad was born in Arkansas, and then he lived there for a while, and then lived in California. My mom was born in Wisconsin, and she lived there for a while, then lived in California, and then they both came to Texas. My mom of my family has the worst Texas accent, which is really funny, because my sister was born and raised in Texas and doesn't really have one at all. It kind of, for me, it like pops up when I'm more tired, and there are certain things that I say, like I'm on a, and I say y'all and ain't, but it's, I guess, I also kind of made the conscious effort for the longest time to not develop a Texan accent because I thought it sounded kind of stupid.
His old roommate, this is just a, mine not even.
Oh, Julie. Yeah.
His old roommate Josh, he's a freshman. He lived in England for a while.
Josh was in our grade class. Josh was in our grade
Oh yeah,
class.
yeah. In Great Ideas, Josh.
Oh yeah, Josh.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he when he's talking to us, he'll have like a perfect American accent, whatever. But when he's on the phone with his parents, he unconsciously like adapts his British accent.
Yeah, it's really funny.
It's weird.
Yeah, my mom is Scottish. She was born and raised there, and then came over. And I don't have a Scottish accent, which I don't know. I guess it's probably more my dad, and then I spent so much time at like school and with friends that I didn't really pick it up. But my mom has the same thing where if she, I notice her accent, but I don't really notice it until she's on the phone with her mom. And then all of a sudden I'm like, who is this crazy Scottish woman? And it's like, she always has it, but even just like a little bit of a difference will like pop out like extremely in my ear.
All right. So, yes?
I just have a side note kind of question. Is when people say crick and creek, is that an accent thing, or is that just like a...
It's probably a pronunciation. So two people could have similar accents, but based on where they live, they say crick or they say creek. And so this thing where Professor Higgins basically will listen to you and say, this is where you went to school, and this is where you later lived, etc. I had a linguistics professor in California, and he would have you answer several questions about, like, if you went to the movies, Do you call it the movies or the show? If you get, do you get a sub or do you get a hoagie? Do you put it in a sack? Do you put it in a bag? Do you drink Coke or do you drink pop? And basically, based on your answers to a half a dozen questions, you'd say, you came from this area, and he was always right. And so, and there's also, there's an online thing, there's a linguistic map of the United States, and you answer a bunch of questions, it'll kind of tell you what region you belong to.
I have the other one that I say that I really uncovered was I say cuss instead of curse.
Okay.
Like they're just like
Yeah.
really like small
Yeah.
differences. It's really interesting.
Alrighty, let's take, it's 8:11, let's take a 14-minute break now, and then we'll get the rest of the answers. So we're gonna go from, we come back at 8:25, okay?
You're shorting us out a minute.
Yeah, because we're running a little late.
It's pretty hard.
Break until 8:25, yes?
I don't think that any of the words that we did, like, I was thinking about like the way my life document